challenge. We got the feedback that we would be better off to transform this this methods article into a research.
So even with external hacking events, oftentimes they come to fruition. There's a root cause is still different days of the week. It is interesting that this event happened on a Thursday night, Friday, closer to the end of the work week, which is we talk about in our paper that people are more susceptible to
I didn't know that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was affected by it personally. I couldn't get I woke up in the United States here, and Friday morning I went to get on my computer and do my work, and I had that blue screen, and it caused a few hours of being non-productive.
Right? The nomothetic and ideographic approach, I would maybe start in a first project with the nomothetic approach, right? And to get to know how a survey design, for example, looks like, right, for a cross-sectional study. But in a next step, right, you can extend your knowledge into the ideographic field and methods as a next. That would have been great, right, to have two studies with different time periods, right? One with a short time period and one with a more extended time period, and that would have helped us to showcase the range of longitudinal studies and how the ideographic approach can be applied to these different time ranges. Did want to interrupt you, John, just to add one thing. So if you want to, for example, test psychological constructs like neutralization, you just have to ask people, right? You cannot extract this from any logs. You can extract the compliance behavior, maybe, right? But if you want to test theories, psychological theories, and I think there are plenty in the behavioral cybersecurity research, right? I think there is no other way around, right? You need the survey methodology as one critical component.
I think we initially didn't have that. We initially had our empirical study. We additionally had one about security fatigue, and it was a longer time period. So we switched to this study we were looking at just during the course of the week. And at least for me, I found it sort of surprising that we were finding that the theory, I guess the strength of the relationship between neutralization and employee security related behavior varied during the course of the week.
Time will tell the case of an ideographic approach to behavioral security research, cybersecurity research. Your expertise and perspective are highly valued, and we look forward to a stimulating conversation that will deep dive into the intricacies of behavioral cybersecurity research. Thank you for joining us, giving us your valuable for your contributions to advancing this field. Professor Cram is an esteemed academician with a robust background in accounting and finance, currently holding the prestigious J. Page Wordsworth Junior Chair at the University of Waterloo. An alumnus of Queen's University, he holds a Bachelor of Commerce, an MSc, and a PhD. His professional journey includes a significant tenure as an IT audit manager at Deloitte. He is also the Certified Information Security Auditor, CISA, and is CISSP, that is Certified Information System Security Professional. So before his current position, he was a faculty member at Benlian University. Professor Cram's research delves into the behavioral and emotional responses of employees to technology-based control initiatives with a focus on cybersecurity and algorithmic management. His scholarly contributions have been featured in top-tier journals, including MISQ Quarterly and Information Systems Research. He also serves as an associate editor at the Information Systems Journal. Today, in his absentia, we will discuss the paper with the co-authors. And Professor John Darcy is a distinguished faculty member at the Department of Accounting and Management Information System at the University of Delaware's Lerner College of Business and Economics. He holds esteemed prestigious position as SWUFE affiliated faculty member at the University of Delaware's Institute of Financial Services Analytics. His research prominently featured in top-tier journals like MISQ Quarterly, MIT Sloan Management Review, which is an FT50 practitioner journal, and Information Systems Research. Centers on cybersecurity management with a focus on the human factors influencing IT security. His expertise has been widely recognized with citations in major outlets such as the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. Currently, he serves as senior editor of the MISQ Quarterly and has garnered multiple awards in his editorial contributions. Prior to his illustrated academic career, he was employed by Ford Motor Company as a cost accountant and financial systems analyst. And Professor Alexander Benlian is a distinguished scholar and the director of the Endowed Chair of Information Systems and E-Services at Darmstadt University of Technology. Since 2012, he has been leading figure in digital innovation, exploring algorithmic management, workplace digital transformation, and human AI collaboration. With a PhD from University of Munich and previous experience at an assistant professor and business consultant and McKinsey and Company, Professor Benlian's work integrates insights from information systems, entrepreneurship, service research, psychology, and ethics. His research has been widely published in prestigious journals, placing him among the top 1% of information systems scholars globally. So in this MISQ Quarterly Insider interview, we deep dive into the paper, Time Will Tell, the case of an idiographic approach to behavioral cybersecurity research, discussing the nuanced aspects of behavioral cybersecurity and its implications for future research and practice. So we will start with the general questions. So Mayukh, can you take it over from here?
Yes, Kaushik. Thanks, Professor, for joining us. So we'll start with the first question. Could you share us any unexpected challenges or interesting insights you encountered while conducting the empirical study for this research article?
You want to go, Alex, first?
Yeah, okay. I can go first. So I think one of the key challenges in our journey to publish this article was that our starting point was that we aimed for writing a methods paper regarding the idiosyncratic approach. So on a broader level, and I think if I remember correctly, John, we initially focused on the topic of cybersecurity fatigue, right? Which we wanted to use as a sample study to showcase the idiographic approach. And during the review process over the rounds of revisions, right, a key challenge was that, but maybe not a challenge. We got the feedback that we would be better off to transform this this methods article into a research article and focus on a more established cybersecurity theory to showcase the idiographic approach, right? So the challenge was maybe we started out with quite a current topic of cybersecurity fatigue, and then to come up with a more classical theoretical approach in the cybersecurity literature, right? And this was suggested because the reviewers and the editors that it would make a better example for the benefits of the idiosyncratic approach if we are able to show that we can validate part of existing between person theories, but also extend classical approaches. And that's why we shifted to the neutralization study, right, over time. And this was a bit of a unexpected challenge, right, to shift so much during one review process.
Right. Yeah, that's when Alex talks about the classic theories used in sort of the behavioral cybersecurity research realm. Neutralization is well known. Again, we initially started out with this idea of looking at security fatigue, but it wasn't it was kind of a new concept. So like Alex said, I remember the reviewers said, well, why don't you pick a theory that's more well known in this space to sort of prove your point about the benefits of the idiographic approach. And then I think another thing, and sort of this is a lessons learned even for authors that might be listening to this, is again, like Alex said, we started out with this being a methods article, and it completely changed in terms of our approach. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but we were also challenged to add a little bit more of a theoretical contribution, or initially we looked at it as just sort of a methods piece and saying, well, we think this idiographic approach is interesting and something that maybe not hasn't been highlighted too much in the behavioral cybersecurity realm. So we really shifted, and we had a great, I think, review experience. They were pretty clear and direct, and from what I recall, and I think as with most papers, I think we can say that it definitely ended up better as a result of the process.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks, Professor. So we'll move on to the second question, quite related, and it's common for us scholars and new scholars also to navigate that through. Like, what inspired you to collaborate on this research project, and what common thread sustained your teamwork throughout the writing process? Because writing single is something, but collaborating together of three authors from three different universities, like what inspired and what was the common thread?
I think real quickly, I'll say this is really where I think the benefits of like going to conferences and getting to know people really came to fruition, because Alec and I had been working on some projects in the cybersecurity realm. And I remember when we initially were thinking about this project, I thought we really could use someone with some expertise and sort of this within individual approach, the idiographic approach. And I think I said to Alec, I said, you had been collaborating with Alexander Benlian before in some project, and I was aware of Alex had done some research using experience sampling approaches. And I think just Alec and I, during one of our conversations, I said, maybe we should ask him if he wants to get involved. And I really think that it would be a great addition to the team. And so that's sort of how I remember it coming about in terms of the three of us coming together and working on this project.
Yeah, maybe just add that a common thread was our curiosity in terms of how cybersecurity behavior changes over time. I think John also did a couple of early studies, right, on within person behaviors, and I did also a couple of studies, not in the cybersecurity field, but in related research streams in the IS field. But I think a common thread was to find out more about how cybersecurity behaviors change within person over time, right? And this was the key inspiration, I would say, because we saw an opportunity, right, to go down this path and shed more light on the fluctuations that may happen within persons over time in terms of security behavior.
Sure, sir. So moving on, so this is the question, a different type, like where there were any particular findings or results from your study that actually surprised you or challenged your initial assumptions, or leading to further exploration or insight on the behavioral security phenomenon?
The empirical study we have in there, which is on neutralization theory and basically how people respond to it during different days of the week, in terms of do they tend to neutralize more or less, as the week goes on, as the work week goes on. I think we initially didn't have that. We initially had our empirical study. We additionally had one about security fatigue, and it was a longer time period. So we switched to this study. We were looking at just during the course of the week. And at least for me, I found it sort of surprising that we were finding that the theory, I guess the strength of the relationship between neutralization and employee security related behavior varied during the course of the week. So we made that sort of, one of our core contributions, and what we describe as a contribution to our understanding of neutralization theory and how it applies to employee security behavior. But I would say initially it surprised me in a positive way, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting, and maybe can we sort of theoretically explain why this might be happening? So, and again, that made it into the paper, and sort of, I think, is one of the key contributions of the paper.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think that's the key, well, surprising point that we found in our study, and that's also the core message of our paper, that there can be novel findings, right, that go above and beyond between person findings.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, professors. So I will take over from here. So next questions are discourse and domain specific. So my next question is, in what ways does the idiographic approach, which involves within-person analysis of longitudinal data, contribute to the validation of the widely accepted theories in behavioral cybersecurity research, which are primarily based on the nomothetic approach, that is cross-sectional data and between-person analysis?
You want to take that, Alex?
Yeah, I can take this one. So in terms of validation, well, maybe it's worthwhile to just go back to the between person approach, which you basically can, well, compare to getting snapshots, right, across many individuals in one point in time, right? So it's about a population of individuals, right? And this is contrasted to the idiographic approach, the within-person approach, where it's not a snapshot that we want to get at, but more or less at some sort of movies, right? We are looking at individual behavior over time, right? So several measures over time, and to look at a population of experiences and situations, right, that we are interested in. And we want to understand how stable and consistent behavior, cybersecurity behavior, is over time within people, right? And so in terms of validating, well, that's the question: what happens at the between person level and what happens in the within person level, right? And in a lot of cases, well, you can see also in other fields, not only in the IS field, that well, basic relationships on the between person level can be, well, validated on the within person level, right? That you have similar relationships in terms of direction, right, and significance, well, this can be one goal, right, of idiographic approaches and studies, that you try to find similar relationships. And I think the technical term is called homology, right, across levels. And well, this might be one goal, right, of idiographic research. But of course, and well, we are also mentioning this in the paper, I think from a theoretical point of view, it's much more interesting to find diverging results on the different levels. And this is what we, well, I think already mentioned in our study in terms of neutralization, that the relationship, right, that we found over the different work weeks got more, was reinforced, right? The strength increased over the work week as the work week progresses. And this was something interesting, right? That we see a shift in the significance of the effects, right? Where we have, at some days, we have no no relationship, a null relationship, and at some days we have a significant relationship, right? Well, if I remember correctly, a negative relationship.
Right, and that shifting relationship we would not have been able to see if we did the nomothetic approach, the between person approach. It would have been masked, right? It would have been all that would have been within there. So that was the benefit of the ideographic approach. It allowed us, at least in that case, to dig in and see the differences in this, how the theory works on different days of the week.
Yeah, thank you so much, professors. So my next question is, what are the specific variables and proxies employed to quantify the evolution of cybersecurity behavior of individual, and that is employees over time?
So what are specific, the question, what are the specific variables? How do you proxy cybersecurity behavior over time?
Yes.
I think for us, I'm trying, at least in terms of how we did it, it was more of a methodological approach. Whereas, we use some of the, if you look at our survey we used in the study and the paper, we used basically the same survey measurement items, although the wordings were adjusted for daily measurement. But it was more the experience sampling approach where we captured these measures at multiple points in time. So making it a purely within person study, and that allowed us to explore this evolution of behavior over time. So at least one way to answer your question, we didn't actually change the measures. It was more how they were utilized, the methodological, the research design. So that's one way to go about trying to get, cybersecurity behavior over time, just capturing it at multiple points in time as the experience sampling approach does. I don't know if you have anything different to say on that, Alex.
No, I totally agree. And I think we also show in table 5 of our article that there are a couple of methods, analytical, but also data collection methods, in terms of how you can quantify the evolution of constructs. There are several alternatives, right? And we picked one, but for sure there are a couple of other methods on how you can model trajectories or the evolution of phenomena and relationships over time, right? And so there are a couple of alternatives.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. It's very apt. Yeah. So next question goes like this. So how does the severity of sanctions influence the cybersecurity compliance within an organization? How is the effect measured in the current paper? What additional measures could be implemented to enhance compliance?
So I cannot remember whether we have measured this in this empirical study. So I think in the neutralization study we did not focus on severity of sanctions. I think this is not included in this research model. So John, correct me if I'm
Right.
wrong. I think severity of sanctions more integrated in deterrence theoretical research models, right? And yeah,
and I've done some research in that area with deterrence models. But to answer your question, right, I don't think we have it in this. When I initially saw the question, I was like, maybe we had it as a control variable. It's often considered as a control variable in studies where they look at employees' compliance, but I can't recall. I don't think it made it into this one. But you asked the question, how does severity of sanctions influence cybersecurity compliance? And there's a lot of research in the behavioral cybersecurity realm that's used as deterrence theory. And the basic idea is if people perceive stronger sanctions for non-compliance, they are then more likely to engage in compliant behavior, right? It's a pretty simple theoretical perspective. There's multiple ways with it. You can dig into the theory, deterrence theory, and when you look at perceptions of sanctions, you can look at the certainty of sanctions. So how likely sanctions are to occur, the severity, so how severe they are, as you asked about, and then there's also this concept of celerity, which is how swift the sanctions are. And typically those three dimensions of sanctions are what are looked at in these deterrence-based studies. There's I say a lot. There's a pretty significant body of research, particularly some of the earlier stuff that's looked at employee security behavior in the IS literature that's based on these deterrence principles, and they do look at the influence of severity of sanctions. But yeah, it wasn't a key focus of this study. Like I said, I can't recall if we ended up using it as a control, because it sort of is a known predictor of employees' compliant or non-compliant behavior. And that is, of course, our dependent variable that we were looking at.
So
I
maybe,
also
maybe
don't
just,
think.
yeah.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, just one comment. I think what would be interesting from an ideographic perspective would be, or what would be the more interesting question, how severity of sanctions changes over time within organizations, right? And how these changes have in turn an effect on cybersecurity behaviors, right? So I think this would be an interesting question, research questions, right, going forward.
Yeah, right. We focused on neutralization theory, but I think probably you could think of maybe applying an ideographic approach to deterrence theory and seeing how if we can gain additional insights from that theory into that theory in this realm.
Yes, thank you, sir. In one table, I could remember it was, 5, 6, and 7, such kind of numbers were given over which measures the behavior, which talks about the severity of sanctions. So
okay,
that is why I put this question like that. So
gotcha.
So just a second. My next question is, to what extent does the survey methodology play a crucial role in employees' self-assessment of their behavior, particularly regarding compliance with cybersecurity policy?
It's critical in the sense I think you have to understand, I think maybe the limitations of the survey methodology. So right in our study and in a number of them, we're asking people to self-report on their compliant behavior with regard to cybersecurity policies. I think we make the point in the paper, and they make this point sometimes in the experience sampling literature, that when I think we argue that this is the best, or one of the better ways to get at it. Obviously, the holy grail would be if you get actual logs of data, on a daily basis, and see if people are complying with aspects of cybersecurity policy. But absent that, asking people, over the course of the week is generally considered, an acceptable way of doing it. I don't know. Go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
I did want to interrupt you, John. Just to add one thing. So if you want to, for example, test psychological constructs like neutralization, you just have to ask people, right? You cannot extract this from any logs. You can extract the compliance behavior, maybe, right? But if you want to test theories, psychological theories, and I think there are plenty in the behavioral cybersecurity research, right? I think there is no other way around, right? You need the survey methodology as one critical component.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like if someone were to, I thought maybe you're getting at with your question, which would be a good one, if someone were to say, well, why did you guys use a survey for this? Right. I think Alex's answer is a good one. At least for specifically, we're testing the effect of neutralization, which is a psychological construct. And I don't know if there's really an objective measurement of that. So at least for that part of the relationship, we would need a survey to get at that neutralization. I agree.
So
I don't know if anyone's come up with like physiological measures for that, but
right. Can you simply put like this, that for behavioral cybersecurity research, the primary survey method is one of the standardized thing that we can take into account?
Survey methodology, it is. I will say the research designs that employ the survey methodology are getting more rigorous I mean, ours, the experience sampling design is, in some ways you could argue more rigorous than just the single shot snapshot one time, right? So multiple data collections. Some of these designs are getting pretty sophisticated where you can better assess causality, temporal precedence, survey methodology in general is still, I think, probably one of the more popular approaches in behavioral cybersecurity research. I think the designs are getting more robust and more sophisticated, I would argue, but still a lot of times people say, well, I've heard the comment, is survey research dead? Is it sort of outdated? And I think it's more a case of we just have to get more sophisticated with how we use survey research. I know myself, I like to look at some of the research that's being done in industrial organizational psychology and in journals like the Journal of Applied Psychology, and they have some really interesting designs where they're still using sort of research methods, or survey methods.
Or what you can observe is that the survey methodology is increasingly combined and mixed with other types of methods, right? In mixed or multi-methods research designs. So I would totally agree with John. I think in our days you have to make the research design a bit more sophisticated in a specific dimension. Either you are conducting multiple measurements over time, like in the experience sampling, right? Or combine it with other methods, be it an experiment, right? Or a qualitative study, right? So I think this is what we are currently seeing in terms of the survey methodology.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
I think that's in general in terms of the IS field, not just with regard to behavioral cybersecurity research, but as we pointed out in the paper, I think in one of the appendix tables, there's sort of a history of this snapshot single survey approach in the behavioral cybersecurity literature. So there's definitely room for more what we would call sophisticated approaches, research designs with surveys.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. So we move on to the next section. So it's basically reflective questions for the authors. So the first question here would be can you recall any specific moment during your collaborative writing process when you had different perspective among you authors and on how you interpreted a set of data or derive conclusion from the result? So did you have any different perspective and then you converged?
I don't remember. Do you remember anything, Alex, where we were really different? I remember sort of us going through the data, and again, we initially had the cybersecurity fatigue longitudinal study in there, which was that study was conducted over the course of months, whereas we ended up going with the experience sampling study for neutralization theory, which was over a weekly time frame. But I don't think we had vastly different perspectives. We did, between the two of us, sort of do some multiple analysis on the data until I think maybe we were, one of the things I do remember was we were finding some differences over time in the data. So something was happening in the data where it was like when we broke it down and used this ideographic approach, we were finding some differences. I think initially we didn't quite know how to make sense of that. And ultimately we ended up putting in a little bit of a theoretical perspective, the idea that neutralization theory acts differently, or the strength of the theory is different over the course of the week. And I think we draw on the idea of like ego depletion in the paper, which was, we didn't initially have that in there, but I to answer your question, I don't think we had really divergent perspectives. It was sort of more iterative as we were, eventually we came up with that to try to explain what we were finding. Because initially, I also think when we started this out, we were just trying to make the point that these theories might operate differently over time. if you look at them over time, if you apply an idiographic approach. And then it became, okay, now explain why this is happening differently over time. So that was sort of the iterative process I think we went through, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
When I say if I recall, because you have to remember these papers, it's been a couple years now, right, since we,
True.
once you see them in print, at least, so we sort of have to refresh our memory a little bit.
So, anything to add, Professor Alex, or Deacon?
No, I think we had no disagreements or divergences in terms of how we interpreted our data. I just can remember another thing, but not related to the data, but more on how many studies to include in our paper. Right, we already mentioned it. We had the cybersecurity fatigue on the one side, and then neutralization theory on the other side. I think we had, in one of our revisions, I think we had the 2 studies in the paper, right? And I think, well, we had a discussion, and we had a discussion in the team. Should we include both, or should we focus on only one study to showcase our key messages in the paper? And but I think it wasn't a big issue, right? But we had to struggle with this question: should it be a multi-study or only one study? And we ended up including only the neutralization study in the paper.
And if I recall, Alex, I think the review team sort of gave us, they didn't really give us, they didn't say either way exactly what to do. They said, just sort of think about this. Maybe focus on the one where you can more strongly theoretically justify it. Whereas I think we thought the fatigue study was a bit more exploratory. It was sort of demonstrating that there might be changes over time, but sort of gets to the decisions that an author team has to make during the course of the review process, and explain why you did what and what your thinking was behind what you did and what changes you made in the paper.
Got it, Professor. I think the last point was interesting because it relates to the next question very much. Like, the question is, like, looking back, is there any particular aspect of the research article that you now believe could have approached or explained differently to enhance the clarity or impact of the paper?
I'll say one thing. We've been mentioning that there was this other study, the cybersecurity fatigue study, that was cut out. And initially, I liked it because it was an idiographic approach over a longer time frame. So I think our thinking was, we'll have one study that's sort of a shorter time frame, weekly approach, and then one that's a longer time frame, and they're both examples of this idiographic approach of within person processes or changes over time. But again, we had to sort of make some decisions on what to cut from the paper. So, if we had all the space in the world, and if the review team would have liked it, I think it would have been interesting to have that other example in there of a more longitudinal study than the one we have over a longer time period. But I think we'll find something to do with that additional data.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think that would have been great, right? To have 2 studies with different time periods, right? One with quite a short time period, and one with a more extended time period, and that would have helped us to showcase the range of longitudinal studies, and how the idiographic approach can be applied to these different time ranges. This would have been great, right? But as John already said, we did not have the space in the end, and I think it's a tighter paper, right? To have one study.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. Sir, you mentioned like the reviewers were very direct and clarified. So the next question here was like, was there a specific instance where the external feedback or the peer review influenced any significant change in your original manuscript, or leading to a new insight or improved clarity in conveying your research findings?
I think we've already mentioned this, right, in our answers before. There was kind of direct feedback, but not in the sense that they said what we have to do, but they gave us good questions, right? For example, think about choosing between one of the two studies that you have included in this round, that maybe it's better to focus on one study and make every point that you want to make crystal clear with the one study right at hand. And so I think we had really good reviewers that guided us in a particular direction.
And editors too, right? Good associate editor and a senior editor that were
that's right.
It was pretty clear, not exactly what to do, but it was in terms of the direction to take. They gave us pretty clear guidance, and I thought it was excellent.
Thanks, Professor. So over to you, Kaushik, for the last sections on the guidance for the young scholars. Would you like to give? So Kaushik, so just we mentioned we have like 6 questions in this. We have a 5-year and another one as we have lastly added. So we can take up three from that, so that for the respect of time of our professors.
I'll take
because many of the questions I think professor have already answered earlier.
I will make it very specific. Yes. We'll do that. So what advice would you like to provide to young researchers who are venturing into the field of behavioral cybersecurity research, especially in terms of choosing between a nomothetic and ideographic approach for their studies? Particularly for those coming from other fields like marketing or psychology?
Well, one thing, you mentioned sort of if you're thinking about choosing between nomothetic and ideographic, I mean, as we talk about in the paper, the ideographic approach is beneficial for when you think there's the notion of within-person change over time. Right, so maybe not all theories or phenomena, what you're studying, that plays a role. But if within-person processes, or I should say changes over time, you think play a role, I think that lends itself to this ideographic approach. And I think we talk about that a little bit, or probably more than a little bit, but in the last section of the paper, we try to articulate where we think this ideographic approach is perhaps most valuable, when time matters, things like that. To the point about your question for scholars coming from marketing or psychology, just as a general comment, I think it would be important for them to understand the current conversation in the information systems literature with regard to behavioral cybersecurity. To know what's happening in the literature, what are the current approaches. So if I was someone, from that discipline and I wanted to perhaps publish an MIS quarterly, I think it's important, again, to understand sort of the current conversation happening in our discipline. Not that it has to be written exactly like an IS paper, but at least sort of situating what you're studying within, what's going on amongst IS scholars who are studying the topic. That's a more general piece of feedback. But at least on that, that's what I would say with regard to that particular part of your question.
Yeah, maybe one point to add to this. I think younger researchers, they have to be pretty clear about the effort they have to invest into these methods. Right, we've covered it already that ideographic approaches, they oftentimes entail collecting multiple measurements over time. So I would say in general the research designs are some sort of more complex, more sophisticated, right? And I think we have to understand and learn a lot if you want to apply, for example, experience sampling methodologies. So I think one of the recommendations I would give is maybe if you're totally new, right, to the nomothetic and ideographic approach, I would maybe start in a first project with the nomothetic approach, right? And to get to know how a survey design, for example, looks like, right, for a cross-sectional study. But in a next step, right, you can extend your knowledge into the ideographic field and methods as a next step.
Thank you so much. So my next question is, this is a very direct question related to the survey. So during the survey, you rejected 32 candidates and removed 70 participants. Apart from the reasons stated in the paper, did you observe any specific patterns in the rejected candidate data that is related to particularly to age group, gender?
Uh,
I have the question. The question was, were there any patterns in terms of the rejected candidates based on things like age group, gender, industry?
yes.
Right. So those type of typical demographic characteristics. No, I mean, one of the things that should be brought up with doing this type of research using the ideographic approach, in particular experience sampling, is you do get attrition, right? It's hard to keep that many people, I guess, involved in the study, particularly as they get longer periods of time. Particularly, over the course of weeks, and some of these designs, ours was we just had one survey per day, but many experience sampling approaches will have multiple surveys per day as well. So getting that commitment up front from the participants is critical. For ours, from what I recall, other than the ones that failed attention check questions or simply didn't continue on in the study and answer enough surveys, there weren't any systematic differences based on the demographic characteristics. We did look for that. So it was sort of just certain people, and who knows, maybe it was the time commitment involved or something, just fell out. I've done, there was another, not for this project, but there was another experience sampling project I was involved in before where I got participants from Mechanical Turk. And I remember it became almost personal where I would, there weren't that many, there were about 50 of them in the whole study, but it was over the course of weeks, but I would email people reminders, right? Since there was that few of participants, I would email them reminders at the end of that day, like, did you get the survey for today? So there was probably more involvement than a typical study in trying to keep participants involved over the course of a longer period of time. That's one piece. That's one experience I had previously. Alex, I don't. Do you recall anything in the data for this one where we had anything sort of systematic in terms of people that were rejected?
Well, no. I think I do not remember any significant differences, right?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say. Yeah, for these types of studies, it's just there is some, I would say, upfront work and sort of almost establishing the relationship, and like in your cover letter and in the description of the project up front, and a consent form explaining to the participants, like, this is a significant commitment. To get the full incentive, you have to participate in the full study, and here's what it's going to entail. So I think, and for those people that understand sort of the parameters of the study up front, and are willing and accepted that that's who you want to have, and then the key would just be explaining or figuring out that those people are not different from the general population. So the people that choose to partake in this sort of intensive study are not different than the population that you're trying to get your sample from. You don't want any systematic differences there, right?
Yeah.
It's challenging. It is challenging, right? And that's I think sort of a little bit to the previous question, when Alex was giving some like advice for young scholars who might want to get involved in research like this. Some of it's, you do your cross-sectional survey and then you expand your knowledge base and start doing studies like this. And at least for me, some of the knowledge gained was just actually through going through the process and conducting studies like this. And it's almost a little bit of trial and error.
Got it.
You also
So
raised one pain point of getting the survey data.
right.
Yeah,
So Kaushik,
exactly.
I will take up the last question.
Yeah, please,
Then.
please.
Yeah. So this is the question we mailed you this morning. Sorry for the late intro because there are certain events that evolved recently. So our last question would be like we observed two worldwide significant cybersecurity events recently. One was the Microsoft and CrowdStrike blue screen of death that caused a routine bug and which crippled the entire systems in the world which runs on recent Windows and Azure. And there was another event that was very specific to India in this case because it caused a major cryptocurrency hack of around 230 million from a Indian crypto exchange called WazirX, which was a multi-sig wallet. So our question is like, I mean, in your paper, you describe three contexts at the end, as you describe. So we wanted to understand, like as a young scholars, when we try to approach such black swan events and do post-event analysis, how can your paper help us in understanding it from a behavioral research perspective?
So maybe I just go first. So well, as you know, the ideographic approach and behavioral cybersecurity research is primarily about individual behavior, right? And the ideographic approach is, well, then also about a longitudinal within-person view. So how does individual behavior evolve over time, right? And maybe also, well, to think about what kind of vulnerabilities are there within persons over time. And if you look at, well, at least at the CrowdStrike event, well, you have to ask yourself, where in this process are individuals involved, right? Before such a bug can have disastrous implications, right, and consequences. And I think in this case, and if, well, I don't know whether I'm really deep into the background of this, but I think here the testing behaviors, right, of software developers or testers would be, well, interesting to monitor over time whether there are some oversights, some critical oversights in their work, or if there are biases or something like that. So how does behavior of individual developers, testers change over time? Are there any, well, I don't know, negligent behaviors, or do they miss something over time, right? So are there specific testing routines employed, but not at any one single point in time, right? The ideographic approach is more about monitoring, upholding routines that increase the likelihood that specific quality levels are ensured. So I think this would be one thing, that how you could, as a young researcher, look into this to prevent or at least mitigate the risks of such black swan events.
Yeah, I was basically, I don't have much to add to that other than, right, time matters, and is it perhaps, do people become more negligent or less security conscious over time, or on different days of the week. It is interesting that this event happened on a Thursday night, Friday, closer to the end of the work week, which is, we talk about in our paper that people are more susceptible to neutralization.
I didn't know that.
tendencies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was affected by it personally. I couldn't get I woke up in the United States here, and Friday morning I went to get on my computer and do my work, and I had that blue screen, and it caused a few hours of being non-productive. But yes, it was an end of the work week event. So, right, we don't know exactly what happened, but to Alex's point, there's at least the monitoring aspect of it. Perhaps, time of time of the week maybe played a role potentially in making that happen. Then the other one, the event in India, which was with the, I wasn't familiar with it, but I read about the crypto wallet got hacked into.
Yes, it was a multi-signature wallet, but still around half of their AUM got wiped out by a crypto hack. So they had around $530 million dollars, and around $230 million were completely wiped out by a hacker. So it's an ongoing event still now. So they have raised a bounty also to catch the hackers, but it's still an evolving event as of now. So the WazirX is the platform. And
right. Okay. So, I mean, drawing that a little bit, into what we're talking about in our paper and the idea of employee security related behavior and how it's subject to time-based influences. I mean, we do know even with external hacking events, oftentimes they come to fruition. There's a root cause is still the human. Right. So we have these hacking events that come from the outside of the organization, but there might be some type of vulnerability within the IT systems of the organization that is because there was some type of oversight or negligence on the part of the human. For example, a patch wasn't updated on a critical server, right? To the extent that, again, at certain points during the week or different time periods that this might be more or less of an issue, perhaps that could play a role in making the organization more or less susceptible to external hacking behavior at different time periods. I think it's probably you can draw maybe stronger, more direct insights for the CrowdStrike one, given that there was probably some type of lack of monitoring, right? As Alex mentioned, right? Likely somehow, a software update that was buggy got out, right? And it shouldn't have.
Right.
Thanks, Professor, for your amazing insight.
Excellent. Best of luck.
Yeah, best of luck. And thank you for this great initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the work you're doing.
Thanks,
so much,
Professor.
professors. So can we call it a day then? Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye, guys. It was a very enriching and discussion. So it provided a lot of valuable insights into the area of this research, into the area of information systems research. So with your permission, let us call it a day. Let us end this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. See ya.